Joel Klatt is joining us today on the show. I don't know if that makes sense, but I do think I can remember college football.
That's interesting. That's an interesting take. I think Manning got in people's head a little bit. Remember when Bill Belichick went for it on fourth down at like his own 26 or something like that? That's an instance that you're talking about. And I grew up in Denver watching those Elway teams. So watching like the old Browns teams of the 80s, Elway was in their head like crazy. And then Schottenheimer went from the Browns and became the Chiefs coach, and he was in Schottenheimer's head as well. So that's what happened.
Another one, if Floyd Mayweather, he's methodical. He doesn't get it. He's just methodical. And Scotty Scheffler is just better than you. You're not intimidated by him. He just gets more birdies than you.
Yeah.
It is interesting. The Miami Hurricanes, the Jimmy Johnson Miami Hurricanes had that vibe.
Yeah, they got in your head.
Yeah. Lou Holt's Irish beat you. Jimmy's team beat you and got into your head.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I think to some extent that's a little bit like Alabama under Nick Saban. Because think about it like this. Let me just bring it to college football. Nick Saban did that to Kirby Smart. Georgia beat you, everybody except for him. Couldn't beat him. He was 1-5 against Nick Saban.
And they'd have just as many NFL guys.
Yeah, of course they did. He won national championships, couldn't beat Alabama. So, Nick was in their head, and we'll see with that game coming up this weekend. We'll see if it's Bama still in their head versus just being a Nick Saban issue.
Okay, so let's just stay with this. That's the game of the weekend. I'm going to throw something out. Those two teams aren't the best teams in the SEC. I'm going to call it right now. Tennessee is going to win the national championship.
Wow.
I came on this show before the Oklahoma game, and I said Oklahoma they're not going to score. Tennessee's got the best defense in college football. Excellent coach. Explosive offensively. I think Tennessee's the best team I've seen. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
You could have paused. You could have thought about it.
There's not a pause. They are certainly, I think, and I've said this on my program this week, they are national championship caliber.
Okay.
I do not think that they're the best I've seen, partly just because of the inexperience at quarterback. Remember, Iamaleava, while he played really well, still made a few mistakes because OU still plays really quality defense. Yeah. I love him as a talent, and the defense certainly is, I would say, making up for a lack of blue chip ratio. So they don't have the requisite roster, you would say, to go win a national championship. Like, for instance, did you know that Michigan's roster was the worst roster as far as a composite to win a national championship in the last 2 decades?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. They were ranked like 14th in the talent composite.
Wow.
And
where's Tennessee?
Tennessee's, I believe, 16 right now. So it would be a bit unprecedented for Tennessee to go win the national championship. Now, I'm telling you, I think that they're that caliber. But to just state that they're the best team that I've seen, I think that that's a bit of a bridge too far.
I'm a take machine. Sometimes they come out. Washington.
And you get a good hair day, and it's just fire.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, you got it.
Noted. For the record, Washington got to the Natty, and their talent composite was probably 18. So coaching matters.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay,
exactly.
let's get to
their defensive line is incredible, though. This Tennessee team, and I will say this: I actually think that in the SEC specifically, Colin, Georgia and Bama are playing this week. I don't know if they're even in the top 2 in the SEC because of Texas. So, the loser of this game is behind the 8 ball. I don't think that the loser of this game is going to be able to get back to the SEC championship game because of the schedule Missouri plays, the way that Tennessee is playing, the way that Texas is playing, and what their schedule is. It's favorable as compared to, let's say, Georgia's schedule the rest of the way.
All right, we're going to pivot briefly to USC. Don't need to spend a lot of time on this.
Oh, interesting.
I will be honest. I am not a man that ever used my hands. I was never built to be an offensive lineman. My wife has often said, you have cleaner hands than I do because she's a Detroit girl, cars, stuff. So I'm not somebody that can ever question anybody else's physicality.
Okay.
I am, now verbally, I can compete with most.
Sure.
Maybe I'm not, but I watched that.
So you would say you don't strike fear in anybody. You win a lot of games.
I'm more
but
Scheffler than Tiger.
Yeah, there you go. You're
okay,
quality Scheffler.
I will say this. As a West Coast guy, a lover, not a fighter, that USC offensive line and that Michigan defensive line, it did allow Big Ten fans a good laugh, did it not?
It did. And
they couldn't block.
the offensive line for USC has now been a problem in 2 games because it was a problem against LSU as well. Miller just made up for it against LSU, whereas he made the mistake that he couldn't make against Michigan when you got a first-round, probably top 5 pick out there at corner and Will Johnson, who is going to hurt you and not just get the ball, but take it back to the house.
He's a top 6, 7 pick in the draft.
100%.
Great play.
And so he made the one mistake he couldn't make while under the duress that he was clearly under against LSU and then against Michigan. But you're right. And Michigan's defensive line really owned that game. But USC is still in a position to win. You make a tackle or a stop on 4th down and you win the football game. So this notion that USC is not physical enough to beat Michigan, I think is overblown, because I think that they ran the ball 47 times, maybe 46 times.
And they had 3 big runs.
And really, outside of those 3, they didn't do much running the football. You know, and Lincoln Riley even said it yesterday in one of his press conferences. He was like, we really should have given up 7 points. Yes, that's true. And guess what? Horseshoes and hand grenades are the only places where close counts.
Right.
But he is correct. And moving forward, I know that they lost in a game that they feel like they should have won, but I'm still bullish on that USC team. That was their worst matchup because of the deficiencies on the offensive line.
No, we talked about this. At one point in that game, they had 2 redshirt freshmen at tackle. And by the way, they're good players. But Michigan has 2 best defensive tackles in the country. Yes. Last year, Texas had them. Texas had the great D tackles. This year, Michigan has them. And that Graham kid is, again, a top 6 pick in the draft.
That's correct. And the Kenneth Grant, who's not Mason Graham, he's a top 15 pick. So they've got 2 defensive tackles that are going to be in the top 15 in the draft, a corner that's going to be in the top 5 in the draft. And they lost by 1 broken tackle. And so I'm not going to panic about USC. I think that was a worse matchup for them than, let's say, playing a Penn State, which they will at home later in the year.
Yeah.
I think they match up better against Penn State than they do Michigan because of the power that we just spoke of on the defensive line for the Wolverines.
So this doesn't happen very often, that we've talked a lot of Texas, and I'm talking Tennessee and Bama and Georgia and Michigan, Oregon, everybody. We're not talking at all this year about quiet Ohio State. Nobody
just quietly sitting up there in Columbus.
They lose their quarterback who says, hey, I'm out of here. I'm going to Syracuse. He wanted guarantees. I'm not blaming the kid. He wanted to play. And they go get Will Howard from Kansas State, and this kid can deal. And so you now know, you've seen this Ohio State stuff. It's very rare when you can be great and not discussed. Yeah. It's a huge edge. They can work through their problems. You don't get into the kids' heads because kids are on social media today. You don't want your 19-year-old players self-doubt. Nobody's talking Buckeyes. What do you make of them?
Okay, so Ohio State is one of the best teams in the country.
Well, what does that mean?
Without question.
Are they the best team?
I think Texas and Ohio State are the 2 best teams in the country.
Okay.
I think I would give the edge to Texas at offensive line and quarterback, and Ohio State gets the edge everywhere else. Okay, so they're probably a more complete team.
Yes.
But when you come down to like the real important positions, I think that Texas has maybe the nod in those areas. I think that would be an incredible game. An incredible game.
Now, how good would that be for college football? Texas, Ohio State.
That's what I have. That was my national championship before the season. So here's something that you talk about, the quiet nature of the beginning of the season for Ohio State. This incredible team, a defense that could become the best defense in college football, and an offense that might be as explosive as any that we've seen. In fact, Charles Huff, who's the head coach for Marshall, who coached on the Alabama team that Tua played for and played against Joe Burrow's 2019 LSU team, Charles Huff told me this Ohio State team offensively is better than that LSU team. And he's seen it. So like that tells something to me about them. I will just throw this out there. In a season that could be as long of a season as we've ever seen in college football, I think it is a monumental advantage to not have to play a matchup game where you have similar talent to the opposition until later in the season. This is exactly what happened last year with Michigan. Their opening month of the season was nothing, which means that you didn't have to basically physically get after it in fall camp in August, you could wait and build into the season, continue to develop depth with young players on the football field, getting reps on the field, and then your matchup games happen later, which means that you're only physically really getting after it for a shorter period of time as it relates to the entirety of the season. So Ohio State last year had to play Notre Dame early. Right. So they had to bang early in fall camp and really get after it and get themselves prepared for an early season matchup game. That's what you saw this year with teams like Texas and Michigan, and now Michigan has had to play USC, and USC had to play LSU, and now Georgia and Alabama, they're playing in the first month of the season, and here's quiet Ohio State, and guess what they haven't had to do? Exert any energy. And in a season that could be the longest season that we've ever seen in college football, some teams might have to play 17 football games. Here they are, and they haven't had to exert any of that energy. I think that makes them the most dangerous team in the country. Not just their roster, but their schedule makeup to this point makes Ohio State my front runner for the national championship. That's why I paused when you said Tennessee is going to win the national championship. The quiet team in Columbus is likely the best team in the country, and they haven't had to do anything.
Or been talked about, doubted, anything. Just play the game, get better slowly. So I, a couple of weeks ago, anointed Colorado the new fake ID of college football.
Yeah, how's that working out?
Well, just because you have a fake ID doesn't mean sometimes you don't sneak into a bar and have a great night. That happens. That's why, believe me,
truer words have never been spoken, Colin.
I never used one.
You know what I mean?
All 6 of my kids had, but nonetheless.
13 years sober. How do you think I did?
You probably early, maybe, and then late. No.
Yeah, there you go.
You grew.
I grew.
That doesn't surprise
I developed.
me. I never have. So, Colorado game, I watched it. I went out with my wife, and I sat there for an hour and a half. And
you hoped they lost, didn't you?
I'm not going to say that.
No, you did.
I was surprised they won.
You secretly were hoping they lost.
I was more surprised they won. Does this reverberate? Does it matter, or is it just a wild, crazy, fun win?
Can it be both?
Could.
Let's talk through it for a moment.
Okay, let's do that.
It was a wild, crazy, fun win.
It was awesome.
It was awesome.
Awesome television.
It was great. It was college football at its finest.
Crazy.
Yes. It was, and the best players making plays. Shador throws it down there. Wester catches it. Who causes the fumble? It's Travis Hunter, and it's great. It's college football at its finest. And you could make the argument that Colorado, under Deion Sanders, has not dealt with success well. And so the question then becomes, after a great moment and a beautiful moment and a win over a team that you think, okay, maybe this puts us in the upper half of the Big 12, now you've got to turn around and go on the road and face a UCF team that is a 14, 15-point favorite.
Yeah.
So what we haven't seen under Coach Prime is the ability for this team to stack quality weeks, because they'll have a great moment, and then you can tell they don't capitalize on that.
They're a very emotional program.
Yes, they're high highs and low lows for Colorado. And the next stage in their development is to remove those low lows. Raise your floor. You've got to raise your floor if you're the Buffs. This week is the opportunity to prove that they can raise their floor and actually mature and deal with success. Now, they're facing a team that from a matchup standpoint does not favor them. This Gus Malzahn offense is one of the best rushing teams in the country, and they do it primarily with their quarterback and running back, but just like a combination of runners in the backfield. KJ Jefferson, remember him from Arkansas, ran all over Texas a few years ago. He's the Knights quarterback at UCF. One thing that Colorado struggles with, because they believe in Travis Hunter as their corner, they play a lot of man coverage.
Yeah.
They tried to accentuate his strength in man-to-man defense. The problem is that they don't have other guys with that ability level. And when you play man defense, the player that you lose all the time is the quarterback when he decides to run. That will be exploited this week. I think that number is too big, but I actually think I kind of like UCF in this game because of that. It's more of a matchup deal than anything else.
Okay, Oregon in a couple of weeks is going to host Ohio State. Before the season, I said Oregon's going to win that game. Then they struggled with Boise State and Idaho. Now they've bounced back. Is Oregon better? Did they solve their issues? Because if they're not ready to go, they'll get blown out by Ohio State. They got to be ready to go. But offensively, I saw their O-line get pushed around by Idaho. Ohio State's a different class of player. What do you make of where Oregon's at?
If you watch their games in silos, you come out with multiple different theories of what this team is and conclusions about what they are. If you watch them against Idaho, Ohio State's going to beat the doors off of them. If you watch them against Oregon State, you're like, oh, that team can beat Ohio State. Yeah. So it just matters what you're going to get from Oregon. Now, I will say at the college level, for whatever reason, this correct combination of 5 players up front really matters. They shifted their offensive line a little bit after the Boise game. They had been giving up too much pressure. Yeah. Dan Lanning knew it. That was something that was not part of their team a year ago. And then they shifted their offensive line, and that pressure went away, and Dylan Gabriel was fabulous against Oregon State. This is a team that I believe in. I really do. I think that they're more like the team that played Oregon State than they are the team that played Idaho.
There you go. They better be.
And if we're being fair to Oregon, I think in hindsight, we might look at the Boise game differently at the end of the year, because that's a team that's likely going to be in the playoff, likely win the Mountain West, and likely have a running back that's in New York vying for the Heisman Trophy. Ashton Jeanty, their running back, is spectacular. So we may view that game a little bit differently at the end of the year.
I almost went to Boise State.
Interesting.
For a weekend, not actually playing.
I did not.
It was a cute girl. I was interested, but then she,
Did she dump you?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't call it that. I would call it not returning my calls.
She went in a different, she ghosted you.
Yeah, you know what?
That's what the kids
she entered
call
the transfer portal.
Did you? Have you seen this UNLV story?
I did see that story. Well, you promised this kid money. UNLV's got a quarterback. He's very good. He came in transferred from Holy Cross. They promised him $100,000. He got
New Hampshire. There. No. Holy Cross. You're right. Yeah.
Just another school I couldn't get into. He goes to UNLV. They don't pay him the money. He's like, I'm out. And they're 3-0. By the way, you can't. This is not.
You can't promise. By the way, if an NFL player signed a contract and didn't get paid,
boom.
Every single person in the sports media world would agree with the player. And I hope that if that's the case with this UNLV story, that all of us side with the player. Because in college, we tend to be like, well, these kids have got to stay committed to their schools. It's like, well, really? Because he's promised something and he's basically under contract for something. If he did not get that money from UNLV, then we should support his holdout in this case.
I got to believe they can find $100,000 in Vegas. I mean, of every city in the country, you could find
every single soul that gets off of an airplane in Vegas thinks to themselves, I'm going to find $100,000 in Vegas.
There's no city with more $100,000 opportunities than Vegas. They're at every casino. Go to Sam's Town right down the road.
You know what probably happened? The guy that promised that money to the collective, I had a rough night.
Is there any other kind of night in Vegas?
No, there's not.
Joel Klatt, here's his top 10. Throw it up there real quick. I kind of agree with most of it down the line.
I got Miami up there high.
For the record, I talked to a general manager on Saturday who texted me during the game, and he said, don't be shocked if Cam Ward doesn't go number 2 after Travis Hunter.
I'm telling you, man, Cam Ward can play. That Miami team is real.
Yep.
That Miami team is the real
he said,
deal.
Travis Hunter should go 1. Cam Ward is in the discussion for the second player drafted. Got a little attitude.
I got your Tennessee up there. There you go. Yeah, Tennessee number 4.
You deserve that. Where's it? USC. Well,
what do you mean? They lost. What are we doing?
So do the Niners. I have them 10 in the herd hierarchy. A lot of people are committed, all in, loyal. That's not your thing. It's mine. It's okay. I'm not judging. I'm just saying.
You're loyal over accurate?
This segment's ending now. I appreciate you stopping by.
I love it. Good to see you, bud.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Uncle Colin. Subscribe here to get the latest from the herd, including exclusive behind-the-scenes videos and more, wherever you may be, however you may be watching. Thanks again for making us part of your day.